Muchas gracias por continuar con nosotros. Vamos a dar paso a nuestra siguiente presentación. ¿Qué tal comieron? Rico, ¿no? Nuevamente un aplauso para nuestro patrocinador NPL Markets por la comida que nos ofreció. Ya estamos de regreso, los invitamos a tomar por favor sus asientos. Tenemos una presentación muy interesante y como ya les decía, buena noticia, esta charla, la plática de nuestro siguiente ponente será no con el equipo de conferencia muda, el audio va a estar abierto para todos nosotros, solamente si necesitan de la traducción simultánea, les pido que utilicen su equipo en el canal número 3. Canal número 3 para escuchar la traducción en español. ¿De acuerdo? Y bueno, recuerden también que ahí va a aparecer nuestro código QR para que lo escaneen y hagan sus preguntas durante la presentación de nuestro invitado para que al momento de la sesión de preguntas y respuestas ya las tengamos registradas en el sistema. Reitero la invitación para todas las mentes brillantes que nos acompañan esta tarde a ocupar sus lugares porque estamos listos para continuar. Bien, quiero invitarlos a ver este siguiente video de nuestro patrocinador, UFlow.
En UFlow desarrollamos un poderoso servicio basado en el motor de decisiones 100% web, cloud y no-code más flexible, enfocado en automatizar, agilizar y hacer más eficiente los procesos de evaluación crediticia de las empresas financieras. La configuración de políticas que antes tomaba meses, con el motor de UFlow es solo cuestión de horas. El motor de decisiones de UFlow tiene un manejo tan intuitivo, que las nuevas implementaciones, cambios en las reglas, o seteo de políticas, ahora pueden hacerse sin necesidad de tener conocimientos de programación. Comenzar a consultar un nuevo buró es tan sencillo como arrastrar el nodo y conectarlo. Solo tendrás que ingresar las credenciales. Automatiza hoy el proceso de evaluación crediticia en tu negocio financiero.
Muchas gracias a UFlow. Y bien, vamos a presentar a nuestro siguiente ponente. Blas es un ejecutivo de finanzas y tecnología con más de 12 años de experiencia en bancos de primer nivel y boutique de consultoría. Cuenta con un fuerte historial de impacto en varios cargos gerenciales en toda la pila de funciones comerciales, con experiencia en finanzas, tecnología, capital de riesgo, estrategia, datos, administración, automatización, informes regulatorios y ventas. Con una gran perspicacia empresarial para trabajar en el proceso de construcción de clientes y de todo el ciclo de vida del engagement. Con experiencia en reclutamiento, gestión, tutoría y crecimiento de equipos locales y globales para grupos de más de 150 personas. Demos la bienvenida a Blas LEZIN. Blas, thank you for being here.
Buenos días, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation in which I'm going to talk about new and old from credit and collection as Silicon Valley perspective. So as was mentioned, my name is VLAS LEZIN. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Silicon Valley Innovation Center, and we are a premier consulting firm based in Silicon Valley, and we connect the global businesses to everything that Silicon Valley has to offer, from startups to tech giants, from consulting to fundraising and research. And as was mentioned, I spent the majority of my career in finance, first working for Goldman Sachs, then for the Wells Fargo Securities. So credit is definitely near and dear to my heart. So in my presentation, I'm going to give some of the perspective of how Silicon Valley sees new and old trends and how they affect credit and collections. So let's first start with definitions. We're going to cover new and old, then we're going to go into the Silicon Valley perspective, And then we're going to go into the credit and collections and the trends that we see and the trends that could be utilized in that space. So if we talk about new and old, so if there was an outside observer looking at our Earth right now and 7,000 years ago, probably the thing that changed humanity the most was a wheel. It went from the log to this very sophisticated airless tire. And someone would say, it's a wheel revolution. Wheel definitely was something new, something that really changed the humanity. But if the same observer would look every year for those 7,000 years, they would not really notice that much difference. Every year would be pretty much the same. So as you can see, it slowly progressed from one solution to another, becoming more sophisticated with the different results. But from year over year, the change was very minimal. Yes, each of those advancements, each of those wheels made impact. It definitely changed how we work. It definitely changed how we process. But again, if you keep looking at it close enough, there is not much new. It's always slow increments. So one would say that it's not wheel revolution, it's wheel evolution. So it's slowly changing of what it is on something that was built before. So, and the point that I'm trying to make here is that there is very little of new, truly new, and there's very little of truly revolution here in our world. The only revolution that we can be certain of is crevolution. But besides that, as we look through this, we really need to understand that every new technology, every new trend that shows up is already existing right here, right now. It just depends how close you're looking. ChatGPT, all of those technologies may be new to the world outside of Silicon Valley, but ChatGPT was just a next step to the evolution that was already happening for a number of years. So as we think about how our businesses evolved over the years, so obviously we all started in our traditional offline businesses. In our branches, in our business offices, we all had to be offline. We all had to be non-digital for hundreds and hundreds of years. And there was obviously were digital businesses who were digital natives, who were born mainly in Silicon Valley, but also elsewhere, who were digital prominent. And then COVID happened. I hope you all remember what happened, right? So we all became digital refugees. So I specifically call it refugees because we had to leave our normal environment and force ourselves in the completely new environment where we had to learn new things, where we had to really work in the different ways. We had to do it as consumers. We had to do it as businesses. We really need to become more digital. We had to become more data-driven in everything that we did. So when we think about it, as we come out of pandemic, we're trying to find what is going to be the new way. And we work with a lot of global companies, and we see all the ways on how companies are trying to do it. Some of them are trying to say, well, you know what? We're going to be digital. We liked the way it was in COVID. It was really good. We're going to be remote, both in terms of our employees, our customers, and just in general how we do business. Some companies are trying to forget about COVID at all, right? They're like, okay, let's say that it's never happened. And in reality, we don't yet know what this new normal is. What would be the balance between offline and digital that would make the new developments more productive, and how can we become better through that experience? So if we think about it, right, even with this event, we were virtual, then it was smaller and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and we're coming back to the completely different model that we had in the last years, but also something completely different that happened before COVID. So now let's talk about Silicon Valley. So why Silicon Valley behaved so well when it came down to COVID. It wasn't that Silicon Valley somehow became more agile, more lean, more effective when the COVID hit. It didn't really adapt to COVID. It was already doing things that were making Silicon Valley better prepared for change. And that change came in the form of COVID, but any other change, Silicon Valley would be prepared to weather better because they natively knew that they had to be different, that they had to work with a change that is not yet present. So first of all, Silicon Valley was constantly changing people. The way that people work in their companies, the way that they interact with their clients, and therefore when everything went digital, we became digital refugees, it became natural for Silicon Valley companies to thrive in that environment because they knew how to work remotely. They knew how to connect with the people remotely, and they knew how to create their remote products. Then obviously it also was changing processes even before it happened. And I really like finance in that perspective because it really shows us the difference that processes and new thinking can make. Fintech are the companies who usually using ideas that have been around for hundreds of years. We're talking about loans, we're talking about stocks. All of those products were there before. But somehow we still have Robinhoods, we still have SoFis, we still have all of those products. What they really changed, they changed the processes. And again, when COVID hit, that ability to change the processes, that ability to connect, differentiated Silicon Valley. And then lastly, it changed technology. It was constantly changing technology, creating something new, something to adapt better for the ever-changing environment. And when the COVID hit, and when this whole portion happened, then it was quickly able to develop the technologies. Yes, it actually did roll back a little bit. They still need to find new normal. They had to let go some people, Silicon Valley companies, but compared to the other businesses, they did really well. So what actually changed? What actually changed from business perspective when we talked about COVID and the effect of COVID? So first of all, and I'm going to in the middle, we see more interactions. As we became those digital refugees, we had to interact more. We had to do a lot more business online. We had to talk to our friends online. We had to connect with our family online, do more orders, do a lot of things from the online, so we cannot walk into the store, we cannot walk into the shop. We really had to interact online. And all of this, besides getting people ready to do all those interactions, old, young, all of them were doing more interactions, but it also generated so much data. Because people went completely online, a lot of the data that was previously hidden is now exposed, and everyone can see this data if they have proper access to it and can capitalize on it. And the last part is that it actually created more flexibility. It made companies more willing to try experiments. It made companies more willing to take the risks and change the environment. And the one thing that I see particularly applicable to the Mexican market is that there is a very big community with the Mexican heritage in Silicon Valley. And maybe before COVID, they were really focusing on Silicon Valley. They were saying, well, you know what, that's the place where we want to make our business. But as they become more flexible, they're thinking, why not to expand in Mexico? You know, I see Starbucks outside, I see Dunkin' Donuts, I see all those companies that were here from previous era, but right now, there's many companies who are looking at the Mexican market as the next logical step of their expansion. So the question is that, are you ready for it? How are you actually capitalizing on more data, more interactions, and the change environment? How are you becoming better in this new normal? And that's definitely could be a scary thought. And the answer to this is that you cannot really get prepared for the next disruptor that's going to come to you. Why? Because there will be new disruptors coming to you every day. And unless you're trying to disrupt yourself, unless you're trying to reinvent yourself in this new normal, it's going to be really hard to try to weather off that competition. You cannot look for the status quo. You should really go and innovate and disrupt yourself first, and that way you can protect yourself, but also capitalize on the data and the interactions that are being created. So just to give you a little bit more of the background of some of the thinking that happened in Silicon Valley. Obviously, everyone is talking about AI. And the thing about AI in Silicon Valley, that because those companies are digital, because those companies have been digital natives for so long, had their business in the digital environment for the entirety of their existence, they can operate with AI on the much different level than traditional companies can. And when I talk about this pyramid, I talk to a lot of CEOs of the big global banks. I just came back from Australia where I give that presentation to about 25 CEOs of Australian banks about how can you actually go and take the AI, that new thing, to your old organization. And the answer is that AI is the top of the pyramid. If you want to bring something new to your organization, you need to make sure that your foundation is solid and you can truly capitalize on it. So the bottom line is what I call systems, meaning that is your data is in systems. Can you actually access this data in the systematic way? Or you're still working in Excel spreadsheets? Or you're still passing each other a bunch of emails or text messages or WhatsApp messages? If you're still there, you'll be much better off investing into your old, quote-unquote, systems than AI. Because you'll see much more value in investing into the old and proven technologies than trying something risky like AI. So that part is really collecting the data. Then the next step would be to go into the ETL, extract, transform, and load. So are you actually exchanging the data between different data sources and different teams so they can work and can understand how this data is being used and how it's being processed? If not, again, maybe you want to focus a little bit more there on this old technology rather than new AI. Then the next step is data. Are you actually creating reports out of your data without any manual interventions? I always say when people tell me, oh, our data is good, I ask this question: can you run your firm-wide or regulatory report from your Power BI without any manual intervention? And the question usually is, kinda. We can probably run something in Power BI or Tableau, but then we have to export it into the Excel, modify it manually, send it through 25 different people, and then we finally can do this. So again, if you're looking at this stage, if you're still not there, maybe old investment is much better than a new investment. So those two steps is the processing data. And then we go into the weaponizing your data. How can you make your data really a distinguished point in your organization? So the base level is ML, or data science, machine learning. Are you running some statistical models? Are you integrating them back into your business? This is a very expensive and very powerful result, and it could be more beneficial to your business than AI. And moreover, once you have all of this foundation done, then you're sure that your new investments will bring you most return when you're doing AI versus anything else. But if you're still struggling and you're still working on the previous steps, you still probably need to work on it. So, and the difference between it is that if you bring AI, as is right now, like ChatGPT, it's going to become a toy, or it's going to become an assistant. Yes, it's going to make your life better. Yes, it's going to improve maybe your performance, but it's not going to change your life. It's not going to change the life of your business. If you combine AI and machine learning and data science, it could be accelerator, so your data science team can work faster. It can make better decisions. It can actually do their job better because they can feed their models with AI and find new things. If you combine AI, ML, and data, it becomes a process optimizer. You can find what kind of changes you need to make. You can find how can you improve your organization by combining all of those things together. Then when you have ETL, when you have your data in one place where you can actually talk to every team and every organization, you have their data, it's going to create a digital twin for your organization. You will be able to find all the bottlenecks, and you'll be able to find the improvements along the board. And then lastly, if you have everything, then you can invest in the AI, and that's really going to be a game changer for you. So it's very important to be honest with you and understand where you are on this new and old paradigm and where your investment is going to give you the maximum ROI. So now let's talk about Silicon Valley perspective. And Silicon Valley perspective, despite what people think, is really not about technology. At the end of the day, do we care if Uber is ran on Python or it ran on C++? Not really. It's about the idea. It's about the questions that we ask ourselves. So one question that I think defines Silicon Valley the best is that how can you create a product that would be twice as good as all the existing competition, but at the same time be half the price or even maybe less so? And it seems kind of impossible, right? Because you get what you pay for. But no. And a lot of times, the best businesses are being born with asking that question. How can we make our product so much better that we can change our customer behavior? So instead of working with the old business, with the old tried and true processes, they will go and choose yours. And I'm going to give you a particular example before I go into the large names. Is that we are working with one of the AI companies called Inventurist. And they started with this question. Can we create a research application that would do McKinsey research for 20 times cheaper? Can we create AI that can actually create research and reports that will allow you to make your strategic questions while paying 20 times less than what you would pay to the top consulting firms? And the answer is yes. They have created this product. They had used AI. They had used a lot of data crawling. They kind of crawl throughout the whole internet. But it's possible. But it started really with this question. Can you deliver a better product for less price? But besides the smaller companies, we all know those two. And I really like those two examples because not only they created better product for cheaper, but they also did something really remarkable. They changed how we all behave. Moreover, they changed us so much that it goes against everything that our parents taught us since we were born. Don't get into the stranger car, right? And don't get into the stranger home. And right now we all get into the stranger cars and we're getting into the stranger homes. So what there was, right? They created product that was so much better than the existing product, although very similar, that they changed how the customer behaved. And that's what Silicon Valley is most famous for, is changing the behavior that people use to find new interactions, new businesses. Uber did it quite simply, right? You can easily request it much better than taxi, and you know your price, and you know exactly who will be driving you and for what price. And it's actually a lot of times cheaper because you know whether you want to choose it or not. And then with the Airbnb, especially for the families, it's much cheaper than the big suites in the big hotels. And a lot of times it's much better product because it offers much more space, much better integration to the local community. So really think about this. How can you create such a good product that your customers will go against their parents and use your product? But at the same time, starting something like this, something that risky, something that new is always risky. So if you think about the breakdown, and this is the chart that we have created from the investment that venture capital funds did from 2017 to 2022. We looked at all the deals that they did. And about 65% of all the deals that they did returned 1x or less. Meaning that the best venture capital firms in the world, who have, 2,500 years of combined experience, who have general partners, who have many, many exits, they still wrong more than half the time. So in 65% of the cases, their investment pretty much failed. And that not just all the companies, but the ones that were vetted and the ones that were given money by big Silicon Valley firms. Then about 25% is 1 to 5x. And this 1 to 5x in that period is pretty much the return that you would get from the public market. So there was really no need for that risk. So it was probably a bad choice and it was a bad investment. And then lastly, only 7% have created 5 to 10x and about 3% created 10x plus returns. So what does it tell us? It tells us that even the best in the field make a lot of mistakes because it's really risky. And when people a lot of time ask me about what's the purpose of the venture capital in Silicon Valley, I always say it's to try out horrible ideas. Then the next question is that which idea is horrible? And I tell them, well, every idea is horrible when it's new because it hasn't been tried yet. Think about Airbnb. If I would be pitching the Airbnb to the venture capital investors, they would tell me, it will never work. Something bad is going to happen in one of those houses. Something horrible is going to happen to your customers, and same thing with the Uber. So in fact, it was a horrible idea. But we know that with the time, it was proven otherwise. It was actually a good idea when it came down to trying it out and working, and that's what Silicon Valley Capital is very famous for, is to try out horrible ideas. So when you're trying to do something innovative, something really new, think about those processes that can really give you this 5+ return. And if you're doing something that is super risky but doesn't have that potential, why to do it at all? Then the other question that Silicon Valley is very good at is that really trying to distinguish between B2B, your business to consumer, or business to consumer. And the reality is Silicon Valley is neither of those. Silicon Valley is always focusing the H to H, human to human. And that becomes extremely important because as we became those digital refugees, our behavior changed forever. So those of you who are working in the B2B space, do you think that the behavior of the people to whom you're trying to sell your product changed because the way how they shop on the Amazon, the way that how they do on the Facebook, or the way how they do it on the Google, right? It constantly changes their behavior. So it's not about the business. Businesses do not exist, or any other organization. It doesn't exist in the thin air. It's always human to human. So think about how can you connect with your customers, with your counterparts on the human level. How can you make their life better? And how can they see the face of you in your business instead of just a regular business processes? And that's Silicon Valley what is really good to. It really talks to how it changes your life as a human, not as a business, not as a consumer, but as a human. So think about this. How can you make your product that much better so it really goes into this human to human interface? So now, let's actually talk about something interesting. I'm going to give you just a minute to think about it, but what do you think is common between those three companies? And there's actually two things that are common about them, besides the fact that they come from Silicon Valley. What do you think is the common theme between Netflix, Google, and Meta, or Facebook? What is two common things between them? I'm just going to give you a minute to think about it. What is the common theme between them? Well, first of all, neither of those companies who are really good have been trailblazers in their space. Netflix built on the success of the Blockbuster. Google built on the success of Yahoo, AOL, and all those other companies out there. And Facebook built their success on top of the MySpace. So they were not actually trailblazing. They did not create quote-unquote new product. They just improved something that already existed. But what is more important, what is between them, is that those companies in the business of maximizing the time you spend as a consumer on their platforms. Netflix wants you to stay on their platform as long as possible. That's why they introduced the movies, that's why they introduced the series, that's why they introduced the games. They want you on their platform. Same thing goes with Google. They want you to use Google, but they also want you to use Gmail. They want you to use Google Office, YouTube, all of those applications. So you spend as much time as possible with them. And then Facebook does exactly the same. You spend more time on Facebook, you spend more time on Instagram, you spend more time on the WhatsApp. And they're trying to capture as much of your human time as possible. Why? Because they build in the relationship. If you're so to speak, trusting them, and you're so addicted to them, do you think it matters if they're going to hike the prices 10%, 15%, 20%? Probably not. Because they want so much of your time, they want so much of your loyalty, that you become kind of insensitive consumer. Yes, maybe they're going to lose some people if they raises the prices, but on the larger scale, the more your customer uses your products, the less likely they are to actually quit your business and quit being your consumer. So that's something really important to think about and put into the perspective. So now, let's talk, as we talked about, changing the behavior of your customer, looking into the larger players. Let's talk about the credit and collection. So what's some of the trends that we see in credit and collection that could be built on this evolution of things, of this new to old, and really, what are some of the trends that you can leverage to make your business better? So first off, how can you make your product better and cheaper at the same time? So one thing is that you right now in the unique position, right after COVID, to take all the data that is out there and use it to limit your risks, to limit the downside of your business. So the first information is obviously financial. But that financial information is far beyond just a regular application. Now you can connect to all the banking accounts, you can connect to the investment accounts. There's a lot of banking protocols that people are using throughout Silicon Valley and beyond to learn more from the financial perspective, to learn the spending habits, to see how it's actually being done, and use this data not in some form of the credit score, but actually go and capitalize on it and build on it. Because it's much better to build your own models than rely on someone else, because you can find the places that can offer a better rates to your customers because you build your own models and your own processes. Then the second one is the social information. Because there's so much more interactions, there's so much more knowledge about your customers, you can look into the social information much more holistically. So let me give you an example. When I graduated college, I graduated from the very good school in the United States, and I started working for Goldman Sachs with a pretty good salary. I had horrible credit. Why? Well, because I was not a credit consumer. I was young. I was 22 years old. Nobody wanted to lend me money. But in reality, right now I'm a great credit consumer because, I have a good job and, I went to the great school. So therefore, I have some kind of the job stability, hopefully. And the idea here is that how can you look not from the financial standpoint, but from the social standpoint? Who that person is, where do they go, who do they interact with, What is their job? What is their education? Because all of that is information that could potentially limit your risks. And then the last one is that interaction information. You can actually see beyond just a regular financial information, a regular application about what could be done. You can see with whom that person interacts, with what companies, with what purchases, with who is that person friend on Facebook. If they're suddenly friends with Elon Musk and a lot of other billionaires, maybe there's something about them that is not reflected in the regular financial information in their application. So really, that wealth of information that appeared after COVID is your way to limit your risks through access to the information. And if you're not doing it, somebody else is doing it. Somebody else will look into this data and willing to make a bet that their models are better than yours and offer the better rate based on this data. The next part is, how can you decrease your operational expenses? So how can you make your product cheaper? So the first one, especially in credit, I really like late fees because they tell a very good story. So in my final years at Goldman Sachs, I was a part of the team that was working on what is called Goldman Sachs Marcus. It's a consumer loan. And that consumer loan does not have late fees at all. If you're late with your payment, you just get the increased interest because your principal stayed the same, but you don't get that $35 to $45 in the United States late fee. Why is that? Well, I was in that room. And the reason why there is no late fees is that because A, it actually costs a lot of money to build the late fee system. It actually costs a lot of money to support that system, to build that system, to train your people to use that system. That's the first one. The second one is reversal, right? A lot of customers would call in and say, hey, you know what, I was traveling, I forgot about it, I'm 1 or 2 days late, could you please reverse it? And because you want to be a good partner to that customer, you say, sure, I'm gonna reverse it. But what does it mean? It means that not only you need to build a late fee system, but you need to build a late fee reversal system. You need to educate your people on it. You need to do all the approvals. You need to do all the processing for reversing that late fee. So it turns out that it costs about $260 for every late fee to be administered, while there is $35 to $45 revenue. So the cost of maintaining your late fee infrastructure is almost 8 times as much as actual late fees that you're going to apply. And obviously, it's not applicable to any line of the business, but what it shows us is that there is a certain amount of thinking and certain amount of implementation that you really need to take a longer step and think about it. What is my total cost of certain operation and certain process? The same thing applies to the underwriting fees. If you already know so much more about your customers that you know now, you can do it much cheaper. You can do it in much less expensive way to underwrite and go and create this particular loan or that particular credit product. You can actually build it in the fashion that you're pretty much spending as much money or as much resources, but you pass those savings to your customers, making your product cheaper. And lastly, digital collateral, right? If you look into the security-based lending, when you do loans against your stock or your bonds, you already have it. It's kind of liquid. So think about how can you create a digital collateral. It could be in the form of the escrow account. It could be in the form of the cryptocurrency. It could be in many other forms. But how can you make yourself closer to the collateral than you are right now? Think, what can you make a collateral right now? And again, digital currency is a very simple one, but there is many other ways of how you can do it, and there's many other ways how companies are trying to be closer to the digital collateral, so the cost of collecting that collateral becomes lower and lower. And lastly, what about the lifetime value? A lot of times we in the credit and collection, we're really thinking transactionally. We're thinking about, okay, we're going to underwrite this loan and then we're going to collect that loan back and then let's see if they come back. But how can you actually build a relationship? How can you win the trust and the loyalty of a certain brand, of the certain customers, so they distinguish your brand from all the others? The same way as Netflix and Google's and Amazon's and Metas of the world do. How can you build such relationship that they trust you, that they have such a loyalty into you, that doesn't matter what you do, pretty much they will still be your customer because you build that good relationship. The same thing goes into the ecosystem. How can you go and build such an ecosystem that not only for your own products that you can administer, but something others? If you're doing credit processes, why not to invite some payment processor to your ecosystem? Why not to invite the investment processors into your ecosystem? As long as your customer trusts you and you have their loyalty, you can do a lot of things. And they would rather choose someone who you trust because they trust you versus trying to find it on the market. And then last part is that how can you make your product so good that people would go and brag about how good that experience was? It's really hard. It's really hard to create an experience for your customers so they would go and with very little incentive say, you know what, I just had such a great loan experience with X company, so it actually made a difference for me and I want others to try it. So think about how can you create your experience so irresistible that people tell about their experience to your friends. So let me finish with this. When you try to think about the new normal for your business, remember that there's only one portion of the business that is hard to optimize, is your customer. If you don't have your customer, you don't have anything else. You can optimize your operations as long as you want. As long as you don't have your customer, you cannot do anything about it. And what Silicon Valley is very prominent for, and what it's both new and old, is the focus on your customer. And I wish you all to create such experiences that everyone is bragging about your business to their friends, to their family, and online. Thank you very much.
Voy con el...
Right.
Fuerte el aplauso, por favor, para Blas. Más fuerte el aplauso por esta presentación. Muchas gracias, Blas. Y vamos a dar paso a nuestra sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Quiero pedir a mis compañeros del crew, a los técnicos. Ahí está el código QR. Seguramente ya habrá algunas preguntas que habrán estado haciendo mientras Blas nos compartía su charla. Vamos a esperar a que aparezcan en pantalla para poderlas compartir con Blas después de esta interesante y dinámica presentación. Espero nada más la indicación. Si tenemos preguntas, me dice que no tenemos preguntas, ¿de acuerdo? Aquí, entre el público, ¿hay alguien que quiera hacer alguna pregunta a Blas para que le pasemos el micrófono de mano? ¿Todo claro? ¿Todo muy claro? ¿No tenemos preguntas?
Okay, I'm either that good or that bad.
Sí. ¿Me prestas el micrófono, por favor? Micrófono, por favor. Ahí viene el micrófono. Wait a minute. A ver. Por favor.
Interaction from social into the credit system, because it's much more old school, the credit application right now. So how can we use those behaviors based on social on credit system? Because I think that the credit system is based on the whole school systems, you know. So the social kind of Rappi is the LATAM example for me. It's much more experimental than a classic and recommended way to use the behavior. So is that a good way to use the social right now, or we need to wait for that?
Yeah, thank you. So if I understood your question correctly, so when you use that social information, when you use that social interaction, is really the attempt for you to understand your customer better. So you trying to find the customer that is more credit worthy, that is less likely to default than using traditional methods. So effectively what you do by looking at this data, you're making a bet that you can estimate the risk of this customer better than the next person on the block, right? And that means that you're taking a risk, right, of betting on your idea. So the approach to this is that start it small, right? Start it small, maybe offer for a subset of your customers to see what could be the best outcome of this and see if your models are actually correct, right? And there could be social media interactions that you can scrape. It could be, again, depending on how much data you can collect about that person. You can see, you know, maybe their rent history, maybe their other purchases. The more information you have, the more bets and the more theories you can form about, is this customer as actually better than everyone else thinks? And if you can do this, you can offer a better product for less price because you are confident that you know the customer better. Did I answer your question?
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. ¿Hay alguna otra pregunta? ¿Alguien que quiera? Aquí tenemos una más.
What's the perspective of?
Can you move it closer to your
What's
mouth?
the perspective?
Más cerquita del micrófono.
What's the perspective of venture capital investing in Mexico, in fintech in particular?
Yeah. So I think that when I just started in Silicon Valley, about 2017, I would say that, you know, it's Silicon Valley. It's just Silicon Valley. And then COVID happened, and then it became much, much bigger, right? Both in terms of the capital, but also in terms of the workforce, right? Now it's Austin. Now it's Salt Lake City. Now it's Boise. So now I say it's west of the Mississippi River, because you have New York capital and you have San Francisco capital. So now it's west of the Mississippi River. And then at the same time, there's so much, you know, Mexican and just in general Latin American presence in this Western United States that they have so much money, they have so much venture capital interest that they start venturing off more. Like, for example, we work a lot with Saudi Arabia. And there's a lot of venture capital funds investing in Saudi Arabia, half the way across the globe, and they have half the population that Mexico has, right? So the idea is it's just a matter of time when the big venture capital firms will enter Mexican and just in general Latin American market, and the same comes to the companies. Because there's a point of market saturation that they will reach in the United States, and a lot of them are reaching right now. So the only way that they can grow is actually come here. And they think that they can win, but looking at all of you, I don't think it is.
But is LATAM attractive for venture capital funds in the U.S., or they are investing in other parts of the world and they are putting LATAM as their last option to invest? Because it seems like it's the last option to invest.
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so because, again, there is so much connection and there's actually so much growth that is happening on the larger scale, right? That is definitely on the horizon. And I keep hearing it over and over again. Obviously, they're looking to the larger markets, right? They're looking to the Brazil. They're looking into the Mexico, right? But they are looking at that space. And I know in particular that there is a lot of Mexican and Brazilian and Argentinian companies who are founding the innovation, founding the startups, and they bring in a lot of Silicon Valley attention to them right now. Maybe it's not as prominent yet, but I see this happening over and over and over again in this market. Okay, I think we have some questions. Okay, so we have a couple questions. Which are the Silicon Valley's perspective towards LATAM lending market? And again, as I said, it's a market that they haven't tapped into yet, and they think they can do it better because it's a vital market. Yes, it has its own definitions. Yes, it has its own opportunities and problems, but then at the same time, there is still interest in that market, and I think they consider it ripe for disruption, and they're coming. They're coming even for try. Not sure how successful they will be, but they're coming because it's a market that they haven't yet conquered, and it's just geographically really close. And you know, one of the examples, Canadian market. Canadian market is very much consumed by the American market just because it's so much closer. Well, obviously they speak the same language too, but also it just shows that it's so much easier for them to go to Canada, but then Mexico is the next best option. What is your advice for LATAM fintech credit entrepreneurs in terms of innovation and value-added services? How can we achieve that? So let me answer with this. So when I work with a lot of established banks from all over the world, I usually, and we're talking to the credit space, I go and I sit in front of the board. They already paid me, so I can kind of tell whatever I want. And I tell them, why do your loans, why do your credit product suck? Why are they bad? And they're first like, oh, no, it's not bad, it's great. But then it's like, oh, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of documents, and then they're not sure, they don't like the rates, they think we're not fair, and then they keep listing all of those things of telling why their products are bad. So think about it this way. How can you change your product to the point that it's so good to your customer that they're really raving about it? Because again, sometimes it's actually worth spending a little bit more in the beginning to win your customer and then optimize your operations, then do it other way around. Okay, what's your perspective on the high growth of fintechs in LATAM, Mexico in particular? Do you think we are far away from having our own Silicon Valley? Yes and no. So meaning that that in the sense that there's still not a place like Silicon Valley, right? It's still somehow, after everything, it's still that place of power. However, there are still places around the world that are really good on the regional level. There's Singapore, they're in China, they in Africa, in the Middle East. So they're all trying to create something similar, and I think every country is moving toward that direction. But the question is that you need to answer is that how much of that Mexican Silicon Valley is going to be Mexican, and how much of that is going to be Silicon Valley? And you are the ones who are determining that balance. Because again, the capital and the knowledge and anything else, something that we do for our clients, is still in Silicon Valley. But everything else is here. You know that market better than anybody else. So how can you be better than best of the Silicon Valley? Okay, which average yield do you consider a foreign investor could expect from investing in companies of emerging markets? Remember that slide that I showed you, that 65% of all the investments lead 1x or less? You need to really show your investors that you can potentially generate that 10x return for their investment. So unless it's 10x possible return, not saying that you need to guarantee it, not to say that you're going to make it, but you need to have an idea that can generate 10x return. Otherwise, it's not attractive enough because in most of the cases, you and them will be wrong. So you need to really compensate for that risk with the return of your idea.
Muchas gracias a Blas Blessing. Y antes de despedirnos, Blas, un aplauso fuerte, por favor, para Blas. Queremos entregarte un presente en nombre del comité organizador, un recuerdo de México para ti.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias, Blas. Muchas gracias. Fuerte aplauso para Blas, por favor. Muy bien. ¿Cómo vamos? Bien, ¿no? Pues todavía falta buena parte de actividad. Tenemos a continuación la premiación del Hackathon, del Crevolution Hackathon, y nuestra charla con la que cerraremos. Les recuerdo importante que podamos tener conversación a través de las redes sociales. No olviden etiquetarnos en sus publicaciones, tanto en Facebook como en Instagram, así como en LinkedIn. Para Facebook e Instagram estamos como @Crevolution MX, y para LinkedIn como @Crevolution. Suban sus fotos, sus comentarios, cómo le están pasando, les está gustando, e incluso también a través del código QR, ahí está la posibilidad de calificar la participación de los ponentes. También comentarios para la organización de este evento, para el comité, porque estas opiniones son fundamentales, porque aunque no lo crean, terminando el día de hoy, ya estamos trabajando en la próxima edición de Crevolution para tener el mejor contenido. Muy bien. Seguramente algunos de ustedes ya saben qué es Crevolution Hackathon. Les platico brevemente. El comité organizador de Crevolution, a través de los representantes de las diferentes asociaciones que la conforman, se propusieron este año llevar a cabo una alianza con la comunidad universitaria de México para crear Crevolution University Network, que es la primer plataforma organizada de interacción entre el mundo académico y el mundo financiero. Dentro de este marco se llevó a cabo el Crevolution Hackathon, donde este año diversas universidades, a través de estudiantes, docentes, compitieron para resolver el reto planteado por el comité. Aceptamos propuestas de negocio, modelos tecnológicos que impulsen la innovación en el sector bajo una premisa, que es la de este evento: modelos divergentes, un enfoque más en innovación. Y cabe resaltar que este evento se hizo posible también gracias al apoyo de nuestro patrocinador, Black Círculo de Crédito. Quiero invitar a este escenario a quienes se han encargado, estas mentes brillantes que se han encargado de otorgar estos premios en las diferentes ediciones y que hoy están con nosotros para premiar tanto a los finalistas como a los ganadores de Crevolution Hackathon. Quiero decirles, les anticipo, que los ganadores van a recibir como premio un viaje con todos los gastos pagados a World Games Volumen 1 en la capital canadiense, Ottawa, en julio del 2024, para representar a México y presentar su pitch a la comunidad canadiense de inversionistas para el sector financiero. Un gran premio y una gran oportunidad. Así que quiero invitar a este escenario a Juan Manuel Ruiz Palmieri, director general de Círculo de Crédito, y a Luis Eduardo Pérez Mata, director general de Crevolution e ICM. Bienvenidos.
Muchas gracias, Marco.
Ay. Muchas gracias.
Cuidado.
Pues muchísimas gracias, Marco, y bueno, gracias a todos por estar aquí participando el día de hoy. Estamos muy contentos con la posibilidad de estar aquí, sobre todo la razón por la que venimos, ¿no? Desde hace 3 años, como ya lo platicó Marco, el comité organizador, integrado por las asociaciones que forman parte de este comité, tanto ANFE, ASOFOM, Unifimex, la Asociación Mexicana de Sofipos, Asociación FinTech México y AFICO, junto con Círculo de Crédito e ICM, pues hemos establecido este vínculo con las universidades, donde buscamos promover la innovación a través del desarrollo de proyectos universitarios. Y bueno, de esa manera se ha materializado el hackathon. Tuvimos la sesión final el día 29 de septiembre, donde bueno, pues los chicos que participaron ahí, yo creo que pudieron tener ya sus primeras canas, los hicimos sufrir un poquito, porque la deliberación fue difícil, ¿no? Y fue difícil en el buen sentido, porque quiere decir que había mucho material de muy buena calidad. Entonces, Crevolution University Network es hoy en día una red que tiene alianza con más de 30 universidades del país, y la competencia que tuvieron fue entre universidades, por lo tanto en los equipos participaron también docentes que pues platicaron y que colaboraron con ellos para darles mayor solidez. Cabe destacar que además hubo un trabajo muy destacado de la gente de Círculo de Crédito con el apoyo de la mentoría desde su área de innovación, lo cual, bueno, pues agradecemos mucho también. Quiero nada más hacer un poquito más de énfasis antes de presentar o de hablar de quiénes fueron los equipos finalistas, pero el evento en el que van a participar los jóvenes junto con sus profesores que tuvieron la oportunidad de ganar en este hackathon se llama World Jams Volumen 1. Es en Ottawa y es la convención internacional de pitches universitarios más grande de Canadá. En ella van a participar más de 60 universidades de 14 países y van a estar pitchando proyectos a industrias, inversionistas e incubadoras especializadas, pero especializadas particularmente en proyectos universitarios. Y aquí hay un dato relevante que creo que les va a entusiasmar tanto como a nosotros. A lo largo del evento se ofertarán becas por $7.5 millones para pasantías internacionales y más de $500 millones en premios. Esto va a suceder del 25 al 27 de junio de 2024, donde por cierto pues vamos a estar también organizando un Revolution Tour para acompañar a estos jóvenes. El premio pues incluye para este equipo un viaje con sus gastos pagados para los miembros del equipo, incluido, bueno, pues el profesor que estuvo ayudándolos. Bueno, pues no me extiendo mucho más, así que lo que yo voy a hacer primero es mencionar a los 6 equipos que resultaron finalistas. Después le cederé la palabra a Juan para presentarnos al ganador. Bueno, del equipo 1 fue Creciendo con Ahorro del ITESM Campus Puebla. Estuvo el equipo 2, Bienanciero, de la URC, Campus Gustavo Amadero. El equipo 3, de nombre Creditito, de la URC, también Campus Gustavo Amadero. El equipo We Support You, de la UTAX, Campus Aguascalientes. El equipo 5, Cuncún, de la URC, Campus Coyacán. Y el equipo 6, Edufin, de la Universidad Autónoma de San Luis Potosí, allá en San Luis Potosí. Así que bueno, primero pues un aplauso a todos los equipos finalistas, no todos nos acompañan, pero muchas felicidades por ese esfuerzo. Adelante, Juan.
Gracias. Ahora sí, el equipo ganador, antes de nombrarlo, me da mucho gusto este tercer hackathon, ¿no? Trabajando con los jóvenes y las universidades, este modelo donde está el profesor, directivos y jóvenes trabajando en el proyecto. Y bueno, pues esta universidad tiene 4 años de haberse creado y está en su segundo y tercer de la carrera de datos, ¿no? Entonces, me encantaría llamar aquí arriba al equipo Kun, felicidades, a Paul, a Fernanda, a Oscar y a Viridiana. Por favor,
felicidades.
Al podio. Es segunda y tercera generación de la carrera de datos y analytics.
Gracias.
Muchas felicidades. Pues queremos hacerles este reconocimiento porque, bueno, pues
falta un integrante, ¿no?
Sí, ¿está por ahí la directora? ¿Dónde está?
Sí, por favor.
Pásale, por favor. ¿Cómo no? ¿Cómo podría hacerse sin los directivos también de la universidad? Gracias, Virginia. Felicidades. Pues reciban este reconocimiento y el apoyo de esta comunidad del sector financiero para pues que sigan impulsando iniciativas como lo están haciendo y bueno, nos vamos a ver allá en Canadá, ¿no?
Padrísimo, felicidades.
Muchas gracias. ¿Alguien nos quiere decir alguna palabra?
Muy buenas tardes, soy Viridiana González, soy jefa de carrera de la licenciatura de Ciencia de Datos para Negocios de la Universidad Rosario Castellanos, como ustedes ya lo mencionaron, y la verdad estamos estamos muy felices porque la primera vez que participamos y la verdad es de que de los 6 equipos que quedaron como finalistas, 3 fueron también de la Universidad Rosario Castellanos y pues me da mucho gusto que ellos hayan quedado, la verdad es que son magníficos estudiantes y como ellos también tenemos un montón de estudiantes que son muy buenos científicos de datos y la verdad es que los invitamos a todas y a todos a que vean a la universidad y que traten de hacer colaboraciones como la que hoy hicimos en este lugar, ¿no? En serio, muchas gracias por todo.
Luis, ¿dónde podemos o dónde puede la gente ver el proyecto ganador? ¿De qué se refirió?
Claro
¿Qué
que
fue
sí.
lo que proponen?
Claro que sí. La final de la transmisión de la final del Crevolution Hackathon se llevó a cabo el 29 de septiembre y fue transmitida a través de LinkedIn por medio de nuestro perfil de Crevolution. Búsquenlo como @CrevolutionMX y ahí en los eventos ante eventos pasados, ahí van a encontrar la grabación completa de la final. Y también para quienes estén interesados, el proyecto incluye posibilidad de postear pasantías con universidades, de colaborar con proyectos, con asesoría para proyectos de tesis. Ingresen a la página crun.mx, crun.mx, donde pueden ustedes, pues sumar talentos como los que ven aquí al frente para apoyarlos con pasantías dentro de sus organizaciones. Así que muchas gracias, Juan, a todo el equipo de Círculo de Crédito.
Gracias a Crevolution, gracias a todos por venir y felicidades, chicos, de nuevo.
Nos vemos en Canadá.
Vamos a tomarnos la foto. Muchas felicidades a este grupo de talentosos, brillantes, promesas mexicanas. Felicidades. Gracias, muchas gracias a ustedes. Y bueno, ya que dimos paso a la premiación del hackathon, quiero invitarlos en este momento. Tenemos un receso de 1 hora, pero tengo una invitación muy especial que quiero hacerles para que participen en el workshop que tiene para todos nosotros UFlow. Ya les he comentado que el workshop es este domo que tengo aquí a mi derecha en este momento, y en esta hora habrá un par de workshops, uno sobre automatización, la clave para mejorar los procesos de evaluación crediticia, y la segunda sobre innovación en la cobranza, el impulso de la inteligencia artificial y la inclusión del metaverso. Muy interesantes, futuro a más no poder, realidad a más no poder, y ya están listos prácticamente esperándolos para iniciar con este workshop. Es de cupo limitado, así es de que si están interesados en participar, los invito a que se dirijan directamente ahí a este workshop, y en 1 hora exactamente arrancamos con nuestra conferencia de cierre, con la conferencia final. Muchas gracias.